Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 207 for the podcast. Epidermolysis bullosa, or EB, is one of those diseases that stops you in your tracks the moment you understand it. Skin so fragile that the gentlest touch can cause blisters and open wounds. And there's no cure. And even for most of its history, very little serious drug development attention. That's where today's guest comes in. Martin Steiner is Managing Director of DEBRA Research, a non-profit organization with a single-minded mission to make EB curable. But DEBRA Research isn't a lab. It doesn't run clinical trials or make drugs. What it does is something arguably harder. It builds the ecosystem that makes drug development possible. Funding research, investing in biotech companies, building shared infrastructure, and connecting the right people at the right time. And the results are starting to show. They have a growing portfolio of investments, dedicated clinical trial infrastructure, and a seat at the table in deals that are moving the needle for patients that have waited long enough. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with Martin Steiner of DEBRA Research. Martin, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
Hello.
Martin, before we jump too much into DEBRA Research, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? How did you end up here leading an organization focused on a particular disease?
Yes, so I'm a biologist by training. I have a PhD in microbiology and genetics and also an MBA. I have founded a couple of biotech companies before, which I ran as CEO, and in the last 14 years, I was also a consultant to life science companies, startups, universities, spin-offs, and among those, I also consulted now more than 10 years ago with DEBRA Research, DEBRA Austria, a Austrian patient organization of patients living with epidermolysis bullosa. In the course of this last 10 years, there was an on and off consulting activity on different matters, mainly on research-focused topics. And in 2021, I was asked by DEBRA Austria to become the managing director of DEBRA Research. So this is my encounter with DEBRA Research, and in the course of these activities, I was more and more attracted by the disease and by the community. Previously, I have worked in several different disease indications, from oncology, allergies, infectious diseases, and I am really very much attracted by this indication and by this community because it is a very close community. It's a very close interaction with patients, with caretakers, and it's very motivating and encouraging working in this area.
For listeners who haven't come across it before, what is DEBRA Research and how does it relate to DEBRA Austria that you just mentioned as well?
Right. So DEBRA Austria, I start with DEBRA Austria. DEBRA Austria is a patient organization in Austria. There are about 40 national DEBRAs worldwide, all over the world, spread all over the world. DEBRA Austria is one of them, is a very successful national patient organization for the size of the country of Austria. And DEBRA Austria has raised and attracted substantial donations and decided to found and form a German nonprofit company in which these donations were given and which has the sole focus on supporting research and development of therapies for epidermolysis bullosa. So DEBRA Research per se is not a patient organization, so we are really an enabling organization that enables research and development for therapies. But obviously, our owner is the Austrian patient organization.
On the website there, the mission is pretty clear. It's a world where EB is just curable. Maybe before we go too much further into the organization, can you help our listeners understand what EB actually is? What does it mean to
Yes.
live with this disease?
Yeah. EB is also called the worst disease you've never heard of. So it's a genetic disorder, a skin disorder, and it causes fragile skin, and the skin is that fragile that upon touching, upon very little physical interactions, blisters are formed, which then turn into wounds. It not only affects skin, it also affects the mucosa, it affects the mouth, esophagus, gastrointestinal surfaces. Um, so there are some different forms of the disease, and they are separated by which layer of the skin is affected and mutated. But generally, there are also different forms of severity. I mean, in most of the severe forms, up to 30% of the body surface area of the patients are wounded. Patients have chronic wounds, which means wounds that stay for years, tens of years without healing. So it's a very demanding disease, both for the patients affected, but also for the caretakers. Since it's an inherited disease, it starts basically at birth. Um, and it's really a very severe disease. In some forms, the extremities, the hands deform to sort of mittens, so it's very difficult for patients to properly use their hands and their fingers. And in many cases, patients at later age, about age 25, 30, 35, the patients develop squamous cell carcinoma. And this is also in many cases then the cause of death for these patients. There's about the average life expectancy is in the range of 35 to 40 years of EB patients.
DEBRA Research, it's a non-profit. You don't make drugs yourself. So how would you describe what you actually do? Where's your role in drug development and that ecosystem?
We uh, we are it's a new model that we are pursuing. So we are a provider of grants to academic research. We also act as I would say, a non-profit biotech where we do in-house development of drugs. We also do investments in biotech companies. And finally, we also invest in infrastructure, in research and development infrastructure for EB to support all the development efforts that we are doing and that the community is actually pursuing.
You've really got on the one hand something that's very mission driven, trying to make this disease curable. On the other hand, though, you're operating in a very commercial world. How do you bridge these two? How can you be so mission driven and at the same time realize that there's a commercial imperative there?
We believe that in order to bring drugs to the market and to patients, this cannot be done by a nonprofit organization or in very, very rare cases, but it needs the collaboration, the cooperation with the commercial environment, with pharma partners, with biotech farmers who finally bring the products to the patients, who do the final stages of development, who are responsible for the commercialization of the product and to bring it ultimately to the patients. We, as a nonprofit organizations, are very likely not able to actually do this. So there we act rather like a traditional biotech where we basically bridge the valley from academic early stage research. We try to demonstrate human proof of concept, and then we try to attract commercial players to the field. Until very recently, EB has not been on the radar screen of many commercial companies and commercial entities. And really, with the success of the first launch of a product to treat EB, there is growing commercial interest in the field, and we are obviously trying to foster this interest to identify companies that are interested in the field and basically bring them to the community because we see them sort of as our customers, so to say, to actually take on the most advanced projects and bring them to the patients. I mean, our mission is to get products to the patients. And obviously, as a secondary objective, it is if we fund and if we contribute to such endeavors, we also would like to participate in the commercial benefit of this to actually refunnel funds back into the community, into the system, so that we can further fund new activities in the field. Epidermolysis bullosa is a multisymptomatic disease. And I mean, as much as we hope to find a single cure for the disease, this is a very high goal and a very demanding goal, but we believe there will be lots of activities required to really provide a satisfactory solution for these patients.
In a way, could we characterize it as you're creating an environment where it's more likely that a new therapy and more likely that a cure is going to come than it would if you were just raising awareness, for example?
Right. This is, I think, very well described. Yeah.
I want to pick up on something you said a minute ago. You mentioned building infrastructure. And that was something that stood out when I was looking at the website and the work that you're doing. You're building patient registries, biobanks, preclinical models. This is an investment that not a lot of non-profit or patient groups do. Why is it so important?
Epidermolysis bullosa is a disease that affects about 20 in a million. So it's a quite rare disease, and many of the healthcare systems are actually not suited to deal with these patients. It takes a lot of time to treat these patients. I mean, just imagine that there are patients who take about 3 hours to change their bandages every day. And if they appear at the physician, it also takes time to unbandage and rebandage. So it takes more time. Such patients take more time of the system. And so the system is already overloaded anyways. And then if there are clinical studies or further documentation required, in many instances, there's simply not the resources to actually deal with clinical studies and with for such patients. So this is why we decided to fund dedicated clinical trial sites, expert sites, which actually currently treat a very sizable community of EB patients, and to support them financially with dedicated physicians, clinical physicians, and clinical study nurses, so that these sites can participate in clinical studies. We believe it's very important if we invest in early stage research that we basically also have the infrastructure in place to actually then test these new therapies, these new modalities in patients. Registries, again, it's a rare disease. Ideally, we want to know where the patients are, which mutations the patients have. So the better characterized and the better database we have on the patient, the better we know where these patients and which patients are. We can devise clinical studies. Ideally, we would like to have a patient registry, which in the medium term, long term, can also act as reference group, as control groups for clinical studies. As you can imagine, there is a low number of patients. So if we could use registries for control arms, this would also very much help the development efforts. And in terms of biobanks or repositories, it is very difficult for companies that are not affiliated with clinical sites directly to get access to patient cells, to patient specimens. So we're sort of building an infrastructure there where we make this available to a broader EB research community so that also companies that do not have these relationships directly, and obviously these biosamples are treated very precious because there are not so many samples available. So this is also a very important part of our activities.
You've got a preclinical CRO for EB that's set up with Queen Mary University of London. Why invest there? Why couldn't you just rely on existing CROs?
It's also a part of our infrastructure. There are very specific assays required for EB, where you need EB patient samples, patient specimens, patient cell lines, where you need a certain assays, highly specific assays. Queen Mary University has a strong group that has been doing research and development in EB for a long time. So we joined forces with them to establish an academic CRO focused on EB, establishing many EB assays so that they are also able to offer this to other players in the EB research community, particularly, again, early stage biotech companies which do not have access to these biosamples and to these assays. So this was one of the reasons. Another reason is to get some of these assays really centralized so that we can compare different approaches in one entity. We're not only supporting Queen Mary University, we are actually in the process of setting up one or two other similar outfits which are focusing either on other forms of the disease or which are establishing other assays. So at the end, we aim to have 3 or 4 such very dedicated. I wouldn't even call them CRO. They're really research partners, but on a more commercial side, so that they're really supporting companies and development efforts for drugs of EB.
You've also launched a dedicated clinical trial site for EB with UMC Groningen. What does this dedicated site give to you? What does it offer?
This is what I mentioned before, where we are supporting these trial sites to enable these centers that are currently treating EB patients to participate in clinical studies. As I mentioned, the day-to-day treatment of EB patients is very time-consuming, and many healthcare systems do not provide for such extensive care and extensive time consummation for the treatment of patients. So many of these sites do not have the resources to prepare clinical studies, to participate in clinical studies, to master the additional documentary burden that is required and that is demanded by these type of activities. So this is why we select a few of these expert centers and support them with personnel so that they can actually participate in clinical studies. I mean, the aim there is that they attract academic sponsors, commercial sponsors, clinical trial sponsors, so that they become sort of self-sustainable after a certain period of time. But this is really sort of a kickstart that we provide, and with more activities ongoing, more companies attracted to the field, the number of clinical trials is increasing. So there is a need to, on the one hand, to have these sites that can actually treat the patients and that have experience in the field, but also that can fulfill the quality standards that industry demands for such clinical studies.
I want to talk a little bit more about the investments that you make, because you're making equity investments in biotech companies that are working on EB. That's not always what people expect from a non-profit or from a patient organization. They might be expecting grants instead. What's the thinking behind making those equity investments?
Yeah. We said at the beginning that our focus is to actually bring products to the patients. And obviously, this does not only occur through early stage research. It basically includes all stages of the value chain of the research and development process for therapies. And since there are not only academic groups that are working in the field of EB, there are also biotech companies out there that have very interesting technology, very interesting approaches, in many cases further advanced as the academic approaches. And we decided to help these companies through investments. And there, it's our primary objective is not necessarily to provide capital to these companies, but we are taking very close look at these companies. We're doing a due diligence from a patient perspective, and we are obviously willing to share our insights and our due diligence with other investors there. So we really see this as impact investments. We do not do lead investments. So we are sort of a silent co-investor. We want to invest at similar terms than other investors. We believe we bring substantial value to these companies through our network, through our expertise. We have a very expanded network now of key opinion leaders with our clinical trial sites, with the preclinical CROs that we have at hand. So we really can bring, we believe, quite some value to these biotech or to the small companies. And there we are talking to companies that are not yet active in EB, but have a technology that is applicable in EB. And there we can really jumpstart with our expertise in the field. I mean, we at DEBRA Research, we are currently 10 people. All of us have backgrounds in biotech, in pharma, in companies, but also obviously in academia. So we sort of apply a very practical approach, and we're really focusing on bringing products to the patients. So, and we believe these impact investments are one pillar of how we can achieve this.
The companies that you're backing, they've got a range of different approaches. There's gene therapies, protein replacements, topical drug delivery, even eye drops, I think, is in there as well. Is this deliberate? Is the idea that you're going to try a broad portfolio, encourage all sorts of research?
Again, we do not apply a financial investor perspective to the portfolio. We are really opportunistic. So if we identify a company that has an interesting technology that is applicable for EB, we want to attract the company to EB, and we want to support this company if we can. So you mentioned eye drops. Many of the patients have substantial problems with their eyes. They have corneal abrasions. I mean, some of the patients are unable to see for some days during the months. So it's a real burden. And this is why we are supporting companies that are investing or developing eye drops for patients living with EB.
I want to talk about one of the deals that you're involved in. a pretty specific example. Earlier this year, LEO Pharma acquired Replay, a gene therapy company that's working on EB. DEBRA Research played a role in bringing those two together. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I will start with Leo Pharma, since this was one of our first transaction that we actually announced publicly. So we joined forces with Leo. I think it's now 1.5 years ago, where we are collaborating with them, as also mentioned and previously now in the press, where we educated them about EP, where we brought different opportunities to them, where I mean, it's probably a little too harsh if I say we attracted Leo to the field of EB. I mean, they were interested, but we probably added a little bit to their interest to get involved in the disease and to develop products for the disease. So we are in continuous exchange with Leo, and we have been in continuous exchange with Leo over the past 1.5 years, bringing the patient perspective to them, bringing the landscape to them that we have identified, and also introducing them to Replay, because we have been supporting Replay over the last 1.5 years. Which was intended to be one of those impact investments where we supported them with very sizable investment, but rather brought them in contact with key opinion leaders, with our CROs, with other service providers and experts to help accelerate the development of their product. So this is was sort of our engagement there.
You mentioned a little bit of education, and Leo Pharma actually mentioned you help them better understand that there's this unmet need there in EB. What does this education look like in practice? Are you giving talks? Are you going in to talk with key people? Are you sharing information? What does it mean in practice to educate a pharma company like that?
Basically, we talked about the disease. I mean, this goes as far as organizing a patient panel for them so that they can talk to patients, to affected or to caretakers. We talk to them. I think this is the advantage of an outfit as ours, as opposed to probably some of other nonprofit funders. We believe we speak the language of the pharma company more, because we all have a background there. I mean, we are familiar with target product profiles. We are familiar with adverse events and all these things, the risks involved in early stage development of drugs. And I believe it's very important to speak this language and to bridge this gap with pharma partners as well.
Is it possible to say what a deal like that is going to mean for patients, how it's going to change the trajectory, or is it a little bit too early for that?
It's probably a little bit too early for that. Looking at this from the perspective of DEBRA Research, we're obviously very proud that Leo Pharma has made a substantial investment in a company that is active in the field of EP, because this increases the overall power, the overall efforts that are spent to bring to develop products. We also believe that we hope that this will cause more awareness. Probably other companies might also take a look at the indication. I mean, we're very happy to talk to whoever is interested in the field of EB, to give them a good overview of the field. I think we have a very good overview from academic research through to clinical projects that are currently underway in the indication. So yes, I think this is uh, how this looks like. I mean, we do not teach or but it's discussions, and obviously the pharma companies have their experts as well. So we exchange notes, and we meet at conferences and exchange our notes and thoughts.
You know, it all sounds really compelling, the idea that you can be in there, you can be taking equity positions, you can be working with pharma, you can be working with researchers, setting up all of this infrastructure. But I guess enabling collaboration in research is also really, really hard. What sort of obstacles do you run into that make it just a little bit harder?
I think you just mentioned it, enabling collaborations. I mean, we are still a newcomer to the field. We are now operating since about 2.5 years, which in the uh, biological research is not a long time. So we have a unique business model or operating model, which needs a lot of explanation. We initially we it was not easy to communicate to pharma companies because they did not really understand our way of mode of action, so to say. And I would say Leo was probably the fastest to understand what we can do and what we are and what we do. So this is something that's obviously getting better with us talking to more companies, explaining what we're doing, and also with now the first uh, successes, the first stories coming out where our model is applied. So, but it is very difficult, or a big challenge is to get people to collaborate. They historically this was mainly driven by academic and clinical research. There were many investigator-initiated studies. So we're trying to foster collaboration and having this mission of bringing a product to the patients rather than wanting fame or it has to be my product. We don't care whose product it is as long as it is a product that helps the patient at the end.
If we look a little bit forward now, if you're thinking 3 to 5 years out, what would be a successful move forward there for DEBRA Research? What would you want to achieve in these next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, we would like to really broaden the clinical pipeline of alternatives, possible alternatives for treatment of patients. Um, I mean, we have in our vision and mission that we want to have a world without TB. This is a very long-fledged goal, but also in this area, we clearly want to make advances in gene therapy for the disease. Um, and but we also want to bring solutions forward which probably have a more immediate impact to patients. We are, for instance, supporting a grant which develops a cooling sole for sneakers for patients. Some patients, some junior patients have problems with their feet, with blisters on their feet, and problems with wearing sneakers. So we're supporting a group that develops a self-cooling sole, which can be put into sneakers. So it's really going. It's not only drugs that we are supporting. It's really looking for solutions for patients that make their lives better.
So is there a therapy or an approach that you're most excited about right now? I mean, it's an inherited disease, so maybe gene therapy is, the ultimate solution there. But is there something that gets you excited right now?
I mean, as you mentioned, gene therapy is one of the approaches that is very promising. I think another approach is read-through molecules. These are small molecule therapies that enable the read-through of premature stop codons. So many of the patients have premature stop codons, which result that, uh, um, for instance, keratin or collagen is not functionally produced in these patients, and these patients carry premature stop codons. So there are substances which can actually induce a read-through of the stop codon so that functional full-length proteins are established. So we have founded a subsidiary company, Read Therapeutics, which exclusively focuses on the development of read-through molecules for the disease. And there we are currently evaluating, I think it's 25 different compounds, which we source from all different sources, from companies, from academia, from other nonprofit organizations which have supported such therapies for their disease, and which we evaluate again now in our dedicated CROs head to head in order to identify the most promising candidates, which we will then move forward into first in man clinical studies. And then at that stage, we would need, again, a pharma partner similar to a biotech company to take over. And this is why it is very important to have these contacts with pharma companies, with potential partners very early on to always evaluate, would you be interested in this? Some companies are not interested in gene therapies, others are not interested in small molecules. So to sort of find the sweet spots. So when we have assets to be further developed, we also have the contacts and the connections, so to say, to the potential partners to move these products forward then.
This model that DEBRA Austria and DEBRA Research has built here, do you think it's something that's replicable for other rare diseases? Is it a template that other rare diseases could use to advance therapies and draw more awareness to what they're doing and move towards those cures?
I think it clearly is, and to be honest, I mean, we have a role model. We have the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation as our role model. I mean, this was one or is one of the most successful patient organizations that has done tremendous advances for their patients. So, I mean, we're copying or we're replicating some of their activities. We are adding some new ones and adjusting maybe to our disease indication. So yes, I believe this is a model that can be applied to other rare disease indications.
And finally, where can people go to learn a little bit more about DEBRA Research and follow what you're doing?
I mean, we have our webpage, which is constantly updated. We are also active in LinkedIn and other social media channels, and we are present at conferences mainly in the field of dermatology, genetic rare diseases, but also in partnering conferences like the upcoming Bio Conference or Bio Europe. So we are very happy to meet people who are interested in the disease, to learn about the disease, who want to explore possibly their technologies in the field. And this is our aim, to bring new technologies to the field and new companies to the field to actually achieve our goal.
Martin, thanks for joining us today on Beyond Biotech.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, You have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.